Ambassador Ji-won Kim folded her last document and placed it in the silver case. Her office on Nexus Prime had been her home for 3 years. Now the walls were empty. The pictures of Earth were gone. The books were packed. Even the small plant from her desk was carefully wrapped and ready to leave. She moved with calm steps, no rush, no anger on her face, just quiet work. Down the hall, Trade Minister Hyun-woo Park was doing the same thing. He had spent 5 years building trade deals between humans and other species. His computer files were being copied to a secure drive. All the contracts, all the numbers, all the secret deals that kept the galaxy running smooth. He saved everything. Dr. Minji Lee worked in her lab 3 floors below. She had been studying alien diseases for 4 years. Her research had saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. Now she was downloading every file, every cure, every treatment she had developed. The other species didn't know it yet, but they would miss her work very soon. The Nexus Prime Station was huge. It floated in space between 5 solar systems. Representatives from 200 different species lived and worked there. The station was like a small city. It had shops, restaurants, parks, and offices for every major species in the galaxy. The human section was not the biggest, but it was always busy. Humans worked hard. They helped other species solve problems, they fixed broken computers, they designed better engines, they stopped fights before they became wars. Other species had learned to depend on humans for many things, but that was ending now. Councillor Vextar walked through the main council chamber. He was tall and blue with 4 arms and sharp teeth. His species, the Altarians, had been in charge of the Galactic Council for 50 years. They thought they were the smartest species in the galaxy. Vextar smiled as he watched the humans pack their things. 2 weeks ago, he had led a vote to limit human expansion to new worlds. The vote had passed. 37 species voted yes, only 12 voted no. The humans had said nothing during the vote. They just sat and listened. Finally, Vextar said to his assistant, "The humans know their place now. They grew too fast, got too bold. This will teach them respect, but the humans were not learning respect. They were leaving." In the human quarters, Captain Soo-young Lim supervised the loading of transport ships. Box after box of equipment went into the cargo holds. Computers, medical supplies, engineering tools, communication devices. Everything the humans had brought to Nexus Prime was going back to human space. Other species watched the loading with confusion. Some laughed. The Zephyrians, who looked like giant birds, flapped their wings in amusement. The Kepler traders, small and covered in fur, chittered jokes to each other. They all thought the humans were acting like children who lost a game. "Good riddance," said trade leader Crix of the Zephyrians. "Humans always acted like they were special. Now they can sulk in their own corner of the galaxy." But Captain Lim heard everything. She made notes on her personal device. Names, words, insults. She wrote down who laughed and who smiled. The humans were keeping track of everything. Ambassador Ji-won Kim walked to the main council chamber for the last time. She carried only a small bag and a data pad. The chamber was full. Representatives from dozens of species had come to watch the humans leave. Most looked happy. Some looked curious. A few looked worried. Councillor Vextar sat in the high chair at the front of the chamber. His blue skin seemed to glow under the lights. He gestured for quiet with 2 of his 4 arms. "The human delegation has requested time to address this. Council," he said. His voice was loud and proud. "We will hear their words." Ji-won Kim walked to the center of the chamber. She stood straight and calm. Her dark hair was pulled back. Her face showed no emotion. She looked around the room at all, the different species. Some had fur, some had scales, some had skin like hers. All of them were watching her. "Members of the Galactic Council," she said. Her voice was clear and steady. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We thank you for the opportunity to participate. We wish you well in your future endeavors." That was all. 30 seconds of words. No anger. No threats. No begging to stay. Just a simple goodbye. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then Councillor Vextar started to laugh. His laugh was high and sharp. Other species joined in. Soon half the chamber was laughing or making their own species sounds of amusement. "That's it?" Vextar said. "No grand speech? No promises of revenge? Just goodbye?" He laughed harder. Humans truly are a simple species. Jiwon Kim did not react to the laughter. She bowed once very slightly and walked out of the chamber. Her steps were steady. Her back was straight. She did not look back. Outside the chamber, other humans were waiting. Trade Minister Hyunwoo, Park Dr. Minji Lee, Captain Soo-young Lim, and dozens of other human workers and diplomats. They all walked together toward the docking bay where their ships waited. The corridors of Nexus Prime were busy as always. Aliens of all kinds went about their daily work. Some stopped to stare at the humans. A few made rude gestures. Others just looked curious, but most ignored them completely. They thought this was just another day. The humans reached the docking bay. 20 ships waited there. They were not the biggest ships in the galaxy, but they were well built and fast. Each ship was packed with humans and their belongings. Everything they had brought to Nexus Prime was leaving with them. Jiwon Kim was the last to board. She stood at the entrance to her ship and looked back at the station one final time. Nexus Prime was beautiful, with its silver walls and glowing lights. It had been humanity's gateway to the galaxy for 15 years. Now humans were closing that gateway forever. She stepped into her ship. The door closed behind her with a soft sound. One by one, the human ships left their docking ports. They formed a perfect line in space, 20 ships moving together toward the edge of the solar system. Their engines glowed blue-white against the stars. On Nexus Prime, aliens watched from the observation decks. Many were still laughing and talking about the cowardly humans who ran away rather than face the consequences of their ambition. They talked about how they would divide up the empty human offices. They made jokes about human weakness. Counselor Vextar stood in his private office, watching the human ships disappear into the darkness between stars. His assistant, a younger Altarian named Zexai, stood beside him. "Should we be worried?" Zexai asked. The humans seemed very calm for a defeated species. Vextar waved a dismissive hand. Humans are emotional creatures. When they don't get their way, they pout and withdraw. Give them a few months to realize they need us more than we need them. They'll come back begging for readmission. But deep in the station's computer systems, programs written by human technicians were quietly making changes. Communication logs were being copied. Trade agreements were being analyzed. Security protocols were being adjusted. The humans had left their bodies, but parts of their minds remained behind, watching and recording everything. The human ships reached the jump point at the edge of the system. One by one, they activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished into hyperspace. The last ship to leave sent a single message back to Nexus Prime. Just 2 words in simple text. "Remember this." Then they were gone, and the galaxy continued as if nothing important had happened. 2 weeks had passed since the humans left Nexus Prime. Life in the galaxy seemed normal. Ships moved between stars carrying goods and passengers. The Galactic Council held their daily meetings. Trade continued as it always had, but small problems were starting to appear. Captain Tae-hyun Choi had been the human liaison with the Zephyrian Mining Consortium for 3 years. The Zephyrians were bird-like creatures who controlled some of the richest mining operations in the galaxy. They dug valuable metals from dangerous asteroid fields and sold them to other species. For years, Tae-hyun had helped them plan their shipping routes. Human computers calculated the safest and fastest paths between mining stations and customer worlds. Human engineers had built relay beacons that guided ships through dangerous space. Human mathematicians had designed the complex schedules that kept hundreds of ships moving efficiently. Now Tae-hyun was gone. The Zephyrians had celebrated when he left. They said they could handle their own shipping without human interference. Trade leader Crix stood in the main control room of Mining Station 7. Around him, dozens of Zephyrian workers tracked the movement of cargo ships across 3 solar systems. Red lights were blinking on the main display board. "What's wrong with the navigation system?" Crix asked his chief technician. The relay beacons in Sector 12 have stopped working, the technician replied. His feathers were ruffled with worry. Our ships can't get clear directions through the asteroid field. Crix flapped his wings in annoyance. Fix it, use the backup systems. Sir, the backup systems were also maintained by the humans. We don't know how they work. 3 cargo ships were lost that day. They flew into asteroid fields without proper guidance and crashed into floating rocks. The ships and their valuable cargo were destroyed. Worse, 12 Zephyrian crew members died. Similar problems were happening across the galaxy. On Kepler Station, the main trading post for the inner systems, computers were crashing every few hours. The translation software that allowed different species to understand each other was producing nonsense. A Rigelian trader trying to buy grain from a Taucedian farmer ended up ordering 10,000 tons of industrial waste instead. Yunho Kang had been the human logistics coordinator for Kepler Station. He had spent 4 years making sure the translation software worked perfectly. He updated it daily, fixed small errors, and added new words as species developed new technology. The software seemed simple to use, but it required constant human attention to work correctly. Now Yunho was gone and the software was falling apart. Station Master Krill was a small, furry creature from the Kepler homeworld. She had run the trading station for 10 years, but she had always depended on human technical support. Now her station was in chaos. How hard can it be to fix a computer program? She asked her technical staff. Her chief engineer, a tall insect-like, being called Takva, clicked his mandibles nervously. We've tried, Station Master, but the human software is very complex. It connects to systems we don't understand. When we try to fix one problem, we create 3 new problems. On the 3rd day, the translation software completely failed during a major trade negotiation. A Centauri diplomat accidentally declared war on the Vegan Republic while trying to arrange a simple shipping contract. It took 6 hours of frantic explanation to prevent an actual conflict. The problems were getting worse. In the medical sector, Dr. Minji Lee had been running the Galactic Disease Control Network. She had spent 4 years tracking dangerous illnesses across hundreds of worlds. Her early warning system had prevented dozens of plague outbreaks. Her research had created vaccines for diseases that could kill entire populations. Now the network was failing. On Rigel 7, a new strain of red fever was spreading through the main city. The automatic medical scanners that should have detected it immediately were not working. By the time local doctors noticed the problem, 3,000 people were sick. Director Su-Yung Lim had been in charge of the human medical team on Nexus Prime. She was now somewhere in human space, unreachable. The Rigel 7 government sent desperate messages asking for help, but there was no one to answer. Dr. Vextai, Counselor Vextar's cousin and head of Altarian Medical Services, tried to help, but the human medical databases were locked with security codes that only humans knew. The treatment protocols were written in technical language that was hard to translate. Without human guidance, treating the new diseases was almost impossible. The plague on Rigel 7 spread to 3 more worlds before local doctors figured out how to stop it. By then, 15,000 people had died. Communication problems were also growing. The quantum communication array that connected 847 star systems had been maintained by a team of human technicians. They had worked quietly in the background, fixing small problems before they became big ones. The array seemed to run itself, but it actually needed daily human attention. Engineer Donghyun Kim had been the lead technician for the communication network. He had designed many of the key systems himself. His team of 30 human engineers had kept the entire galaxy talking to each other for 5 years. Now Donghyun was gone, and the network was slowly dying. Messages between star systems were taking longer to arrive. Some messages were getting corrupted during transmission, others were being sent to the wrong destinations. The Galactic Council was having trouble coordinating meetings because their communications were unreliable. Counselor Vextar was getting frustrated. His morning briefings were full of reports about technical problems, trade disruptions, and communication failures. But he refused to believe these problems were connected to the human departure. These are just coincidences, he told his staff. during a crisis meeting. The other species are being lazy. They got used to human help and forgot how to do things themselves. They'll figure it out. But his assistant, HFY, was keeping track of all the problems. The list was getting longer every day. Mining operations were failing. Trade routes were disrupted. Medical systems were breaking down. Communication networks were unreliable. Transportation schedules were chaos. "Sir," HFY said carefully, "perhaps we should consider that the humans were more important than we thought." Vextar's blue skin darkened with anger. "Nonsense. Humans are a young species with simple technology. They've been in space for less than 200 years. My people have been traveling between stars for over 1,000 years. We don't need human help." But the problems kept getting worse. The Draconian Empire, which controlled shipping in the Outer Rim, lost contact with 12 cargo fleets. The ships were flying through space without navigation updates. Some were lost. Others were flying in circles. The Draconians had always relied on human-built communication relays to track their ships across vast distances. General Vax, commander of the Draconian space fleet, was not a patient creature. His species looked like giant lizards with wings and sharp claws. They had built their empire through conquest and trade, but they depended on reliable shipping to keep their economy strong. "Find those ships," Vax ordered his navigation chief. "Use the old systems if you have to." "Sir, the old systems are too slow. They were replaced by human technology 15 years ago. We don't even have the equipment anymore." 3 of the lost cargo fleets were carrying food supplies to colony worlds on the Rim. Without those supplies, the colonies would starve within a month. The Draconians were forced to send expensive rescue missions to find their own ships. On the peaceful world of New Geneva, the terraforming systems that kept the atmosphere breathable were starting to malfunction. The planet had been transformed from a lifeless rock into a garden world over 30 years. But the atmospheric processors required constant adjustment to maintain the right balance of gases. Counselor Nara Sung had been the human expert on terraforming technology. She had supervised atmospheric systems on 17 different worlds. Her work had made it possible for billions of people to live on planets that would otherwise be uninhabitable. Now Nara was gone, and New Geneva's air was slowly becoming toxic. The colonial governor, a Centauri named Administrator Plex, sent urgent messages to every major power asking for help. But terraforming was a specialized science that few species truly understood. The humans had been the acknowledged experts in the field. "How long do we have?" Plex asked his science advisor. "Perhaps 6 months before the air becomes dangerous to breathe," the advisor replied. "Maybe less if the atmospheric processors fail completely." 800,000 colonists lived on New Geneva. They would all have to be evacuated if the terraforming systems could not be repaired. The Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss the growing crisis. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the main chamber. The mood was very different from 2 weeks earlier. No one was laughing now. Species after species stood up to report problems. The Zephyrians talked about lost ships and failed mining operations. The Kepler traders described their communication failures. The Rigelians reported plague outbreaks that they couldn't control. The Draconians demanded help finding their missing. Fleet's Counselor Vextar listened to all the reports with growing unease. The problems were happening everywhere. They were affecting every aspect of galactic civilization. And they had all started exactly when the humans left. 1 month after the humans left, the galaxy was falling apart. Director Su-Young Lim had run the Human Galactic Medical Initiative for 6 years. From her office on Nexus Prime, she had coordinated medical care across 400 worlds. Her team of human doctors and scientists had created a network that could respond to any health crisis within hours. Now that network was dead, and people were dying. The plague on Rigel 7 had spread to 12 more worlds. Without human expertise, local doctors were making terrible mistakes. They were using the wrong medicines, following outdated procedures and missing early warning signs of new outbreaks. Dr. Kelvin Czar, head of the Rigelian Medical Council, stood in his laboratory looking at samples of the new disease. His people had been trying to create a vaccine for 3 weeks. Every attempt had failed. "The human databases are locked. his research assistant told him. "We can't access Dr. Lee's research on similar diseases. We don't know what treatments she used before." Dr. Czar's tentacles writhed with frustration. His species had been practicing medicine for centuries, but they had grown dependent on human knowledge. The humans seemed to understand disease in ways that other species did not. "Keep trying," he said. "There must be a way to break the security codes." But there wasn't. The humans had protected their medical research with encryption that would take decades to break. They had shared their knowledge freely while they were part of the council, but now that knowledge was locked away. On the colony world of New Geneva, the situation was getting desperate. The atmospheric processors were failing faster than anyone had expected. The air was becoming hard to breathe. Children and elderly colonists were getting sick. Administrator Plex called another emergency meeting with his science staff. The conference room was full of worried faces from a dozen different species. "How much time do we have?" Plex asked. His chief atmospheric engineer, a tall blue-skinned Altarian named Vexenol, looked at his data pad with shaking hands. 2 months at most. The oxygen levels are dropping faster than our emergency systems can compensate. The atmospheric processors are shutting down one by one. Can we evacuate the colony? 800,000 people? There aren't enough ships in this sector to move everyone in 2 months. Administrator Plex felt sick. He was responsible for all those lives, and he was powerless to save them. The terraforming technology was too complex for anyone except humans to understand. Similar disasters were happening everywhere. The quantum communication network that connected the galaxy was completely broken. Messages that should take minutes to travel between star systems were now taking days or weeks. Some messages never arrived at all. Engineer Donghyun Kim had built that network with his own hands. He had designed systems that could maintain themselves for years, but only with regular human supervision. Without that supervision, the network was crashing system by system. The Galactic Council could barely function. Counselors couldn't communicate with their home governments. Emergency meetings had to be delayed because half the representatives couldn't receive their messages. The carefully organized structure of galactic government was falling into chaos. But the worst problems were in space itself. The humans had built and maintained navigation systems across hundreds of star systems. They had created safe shipping, lanes through dangerous regions. They had established refueling stations and emergency beacons that guided ships across vast distances. All of those systems were failing. Captain Murix commanded a Zephyrian cargo fleet carrying medical supplies to the plague worlds. His ships were lost in the Void Nebula, a dangerous region of space filled with gravitational anomalies and radiation storms. The human navigation beacons that normally guided ships through the nebula had gone dark. "Where are we?" Captain Memerix asked his navigator. "I don't know, sir. The star charts don't match what we're seeing outside. Without the navigation beacons, this nebula all looks the same." 5 cargo ships carrying desperately needed medicine were now floating lost in one of the most dangerous regions of space. They had fuel for maybe 3 more days. If they couldn't find their way out of the nebula by then, everyone on board would die. The Draconian Empire was facing similar problems. General Vax had lost contact with 37 ships in the past week. Some were military vessels on patrol. Others were cargo ships carrying food and supplies to colony worlds. All of them had depended on human navigation systems. "How did this happen?" General Vax demanded. His claws scratched deep marks in the metal table as he spoke. "How did we become so dependent on one species?" His intelligence chief, a smaller, Draconian named Sub-General Krex, had been studying human activities for the past month. What he had discovered was disturbing. "Sir, the humans had been planning this for years, maybe decades. Every system they helped us build, every technology they shared, every service they provided, it all required human knowledge to keep working." "Are you saying they deliberately made us dependent on them?" "I'm saying they were very smart about how they helped us. They never took control directly. They just made themselves necessary." General Vax stared at the star map on his wall. Red markers showed the locations of his missing ships. Nearly half of his fleet was lost or damaged because of navigation failures. "Get me a communication channel to human space," he ordered. "Sir, the communication network is down. Even if it was working, we don't know where the humans went. They've disappeared beyond the galactic rim." The scale of the disaster was becoming clear to everyone. Species that had laughed at human departure were now begging for help. But the humans were gone, and no one knew how to find them. On Nexus Prime, Counselor Vextar faced the worst crisis of his career. His office was full of desperate representatives from dozens of species. They all wanted the same thing. They wanted the humans to come back. "The Kepler trading network has completely collapsed," reported Station Master Krill. Her fur was gray with stress. "Interstellar commerce has dropped by 70%. Billions of people depend on that trade for food and medicine." "The medical emergency is getting worse," added Dr. Vextai. "We've lost contact with human research databases. Diseases that were easy to treat a month ago are now killing thousands." "My mining operations are failing," said Trade Leader Crix. "Half my ships are lost. My workers don't know how to maintain the equipment without human technical support." Representative after representative spoke about the same problems. Infrastructure failing, people dying, economies collapsing. All because the humans were gone. Vextar listened to it all with growing horror. He was beginning to understand the truth that his pride had refused to accept. The humans hadn't just participated in galactic civilization. They had been running it. "How many of our major systems depended on human support?" he asked his chief analyst. The analyst, a young Altarian named Zexkor, had been working on this question for weeks. The numbers were terrifying. 73% of council member species relied on human technology for critical infrastructure. The communication network, the medical database, the navigation systems, the trade networks, the terraforming operations. Humans designed or maintained all of them. And the remaining 27%? They depended on species that depended on humans. When you trace all the connections, nearly every aspect of galactic civilization had human involvement somewhere. Vextar felt a chill run through his blue skin. The humans had been quiet and helpful. They had never demanded special treatment or threatened other species. They had just solved problems and made themselves useful. But in doing so, they had made themselves indispensable. "Sir," Zexai said quietly, "I've been analyzing human behavior patterns from our diplomatic records. I think they planned this withdrawal very carefully." "What do you mean?" "The humans never shared their most advanced technology. They always kept the critical knowledge to themselves. They trained other species to use human systems, but never to build or repair them. And they documented everything. Every slight, every insult, every vote against human interests." Vextar remembered the vote that had triggered the human departure. It had been about limiting human expansion to new worlds. At the time, it had seemed like a reasonable restriction on an ambitious young species. Now it looked like the worst mistake in galactic history. They were testing us, he realized. They wanted to see how we would treat them when they seemed weak and dependent on our approval. "And we failed the test," Zexai replied. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most desperate in the organization's 500-year history. Representatives from 200 species had gathered to discuss the same question: how to get the humans back. The chamber that had been full of laughter a month earlier was now filled with fear. Species that had celebrated human departure were now blaming each other for driving humanity away. "This is all the fault of the Altarians," declared Representative Thrix of the Andromedan Alliance. "They led the vote against human expansion. They convinced the rest of us to support restrictions." "We were protecting the interests of established species," Vextar replied defensively. "The humans were expanding too quickly, claiming too many new worlds. And now we're all paying the price for your jealousy," snapped General Vax via holographic projection. 2 months after the humans left, the Galactic Council was fighting for its survival. President Eunmi Choi stood on the observation deck of her new flagship, the Indomitable Will, and watched human construction crews working in the darkness of space. Massive orbital shipyards stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. New ships were being built every day, ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The human colonies beyond the galactic rim were thriving, While the old galaxy collapsed, humanity was building something new, something stronger, something that would never again depend on the approval of other species. Madam President, her aide approached quietly. We're receiving another diplomatic message from the Galactic Council. Yunmi didn't turn away from the window. Deleted, like all the others. Yes, ma'am. This is the 47th attempt they've made to contact us. Let them send 100 more. The time for talk has passed. Back in the old galaxy, the situation was getting worse every day. The Galactic Council had sent dozens of diplomatic missions toward human space, but all of them had been turned away. Automated defense systems warned approaching ships to leave human territory immediately. No exceptions were made. Ambassador Ji-hoon Lee had been chosen to lead the most important diplomatic mission in Council history. He was not human, despite his name. His species, the Neo-Koreans, had been named by human explorers centuries ago because of their similar appearance. The Council hoped this resemblance might help him get past human defenses. Ji-hoon's ship approached the edge of human space with a small escort of unarmed vessels. They broadcast friendship messages in dozens of languages. They carried gifts and offers of unlimited trade agreements. They were prepared to apologize for everything the Council had done wrong. The human response came from an automated system. A cold mechanical voice spoke in perfect galactic standard language. You are entering restricted space. Turn back immediately. This is your only warning. This is Ambassador Ji-hoon Lee of the Galactic Council, he broadcast back. We request permission to speak with human leadership about urgent matters affecting the entire galaxy. Request denied. Turn back now or your ships will be destroyed. Ji-hoon's escort captains were nervous. Their sensors showed massive energy signatures just beyond their detection range. The humans had built defensive installations throughout their new territory. No one knew how powerful those defenses were, and no one wanted to find out. Ambassador, should we try to push through? Asked Captain Vrix of the escort ship Peacemaker. No, Ji-hoon replied sadly. Turn us around. The humans meant what they said. Meanwhile, the galaxy continued to tear itself apart. 3 major wars had broken out as the human-maintained balance of power collapsed. The Draconian Empire was fighting the Andromedan Alliance over mining rights to asteroid fields that used to be shared peacefully. The Tau Cetians had declared war on the Rigelians, blaming them for spreading the plague that was still killing people on dozens of worlds. Without human diplomatic intervention, these conflicts escalated quickly. Species that had cooperated for decades were now treating each other as enemies. The careful treaties and agreements that had kept peace for a generation were falling apart. Admiral Minho Shin had once been the human fleet commander responsible for keeping peace in the Outer Rim territories. His ships had prevented dozens of conflicts through careful positioning and quiet diplomacy. Now those same territories were battlegrounds. From his new command post beyond the Galactic Rim, Admiral Minho watched the wars through long-range sensors. His staff of human officers tracked every battle, every ship movement, every strategic decision made by the warring species. Sir, his intelligence chief reported, the Draconians have lost 60% of their battle fleet. Their navigation systems are still failing. Half their ships can't find their targets. And the Andromedans? They're doing better, but their communication systems are breaking down. Their fleet commanders can't coordinate attacks effectively. Admiral Minho nodded. The wars were being fought by species who had forgotten how to fight without human support. Their weapons still worked, but the complex systems needed to use those weapons effectively were failing. How long before they exhaust themselves, he asked. At this rate, both empires will be too weak to threaten anyone within 6 months. The survivors will be desperate for any help they can get. The medical crisis was even worse than the military situation. Dr. Yuna Park, the Council's top xenopsychologist, had been trying to understand human psychology for months. The Council needed to know what the humans wanted. What would make them return to help save galactic civilization? Dr. Park had studied every human diplomatic message from the past 50 years. She had analyzed human behavior patterns, human cultural values, and human decision-making processes. Her conclusions were disturbing. Council members, she reported to an emergency session, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood human nature. We treated them as a young species seeking our approval and guidance. But evidence suggests they were actually managing us. Councillor Vextar, who looked much older than he had 2 months ago, asked, What do you mean by managing us? Humans are pack hunters by evolution. They are naturally skilled at long-term planning and group coordination. They never saw themselves as junior partners in this council. They saw themselves as shepherds guiding a flock. The chamber was silent as the implications sank in. Every time we restricted human activities or voted against human interests, they made careful notes. They documented which species opposed them and which ones supported them. They were building a comprehensive record of galactic politics. For what purpose? Asked Representative Krill. I believe they were planning for this moment. The humans expected eventually to be rejected by the Council. They prepared for that rejection by making themselves indispensable to galactic infrastructure, then withdrawing that support when we proved we couldn't be trusted. General Vax's holographic image flickered with static as the failing communication network struggled to maintain the connection. Are you saying the humans deliberately caused this crisis? I'm saying they prepared for this crisis. When we voted to limit their expansion, we gave them the excuse they needed to implement a plan they had been developing for years. Dr. Park activated a holographic display showing human colony ships leaving known space. The exodus had been perfectly organized. Thousands of ships carrying millions of humans had departed simultaneously for pre-planned destinations. The logistics required for such an operation would have taken years to arrange. The humans didn't leave because they were angry about one vote, Dr. Park continued. They left because they had decided we were not worthy partners. The vote was just the trigger for a plan they had already made. The council members looked at each other with growing fear. If Dr. Park was right, then the humans hadn't simply withdrawn from galactic civilization. They had deliberately engineered its collapse. On New Geneva, the terraforming crisis had reached its final stage. The atmosphere was now toxic to most species. Evacuation ships were arriving from across the galaxy, but there weren't enough vessels to save everyone. 300,000 colonists were going to die unless the atmospheric processors could be repaired. Administrator Plex made one last desperate attempt to contact human space. He sent a personal message directly to Earth, begging for help. This is Administrator Plex of New Geneva Colony, his message said. We have 800,000 civilians, including 200,000 children, facing death by atmospheric poisoning. We're not asking for political concessions or trade agreements. We're asking for humanitarian aid to save innocent lives. Please, if there's any compassion left in humanity, help us save these people. The response came back within hours. It was from President Yunmi Choi herself. Administrator Plex, the New Geneva Colony was established using human terraforming technology, under a joint development agreement signed 15 years ago. According to that agreement, maintenance of atmospheric systems was the responsibility of the Galactic Council. The Council chose to restrict human activities and told us our services were no longer needed. We are simply honoring your wishes by staying out of your affairs. Good luck with your crisis. The message was polite, but the meaning was clear. The humans were not going to help. They were going to let New Geneva die as an example of what happened when you rejected human assistance. Administrator Plex stared at the message in horror. The humans he had known for years had been helpful and kind. These new humans were cold and calculating. They were willing to let hundreds of thousands of people die to make a political point. But the evacuation continued. Ships from dozens of species worked together to save as many lives as possible. In the end, they managed to evacuate 600,000 colonists. 200,000 people, mostly elderly and sick who couldn't travel, died when the atmospheric processors finally failed completely. New Geneva became a dead world, a monument to the price of rejecting human help. The Galactic Council was falling apart. Dozens of species had withdrawn from the organization, blaming it for the current crisis. The remaining members were desperate for any solution that might save their civilizations. Councillor Vextar proposed the most radical plan in Council history: complete surrender. 6 months after the humans left, they returned. Fleet Admiral Jamin Ko stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Absolute Authority and watched 1,000 ships move in perfect formation through space. The human fleet had appeared at the edge of Council territory without warning. Their ships were larger, faster, and more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different species. They want to negotiate before we reach Nexus Prime." "Ignore them," Admiral Ko replied calmly. "We didn't come here to negotiate." The human fleet moved through space like a force of nature. Every ship flew in precise formation. Every weapon system was powered and ready. Every crew member knew exactly what their role would be in the hours ahead. On Nexus Prime, alarms were blaring throughout the station. The remaining council members had gathered in the main chamber for what everyone knew would be their last meeting as an independent organization. Councillor Vextar looked older than his years. The stress of the past 6 months had broken his health and his spirit. The proud Altarian who had once mocked human weakness now trembled as he watched the human fleet approach on the main display. "How many ships?" he asked his military advisor. "Over 1,000 confirmed, sir. Possibly more. Our sensors can't get accurate readings on their new technology." "And our defenses?" The advisor looked uncomfortable. "Sir, the defense grid around Nexus Prime was designed by humans. We've never been able to maintain it properly since they left. Maybe 20% of our weapons are operational." 17. Different species had defensive fleets near Nexus Prime, but none of them were moving to intercept the humans. The past 6 months had taught everyone a harsh lesson about human capabilities. No one wanted to start a fight they couldn't win. On Earth, President Yoonmi Choi watched the fleet's progress from her office in New Geneva City, the capital of the human Commonwealth. Through her window, she could see the construction yards where humanity's new empire was being built. The past 6 months had been busy for humanity. While the old galaxy collapsed, humans had established 73 new colonies, built a massive industrial base, and created the most advanced military force in galactic history. They had also made careful plans for what would happen when they returned. "Madam President," her chief of staff announced, "Admiral Ko reports that the fleet will reach Nexus Prime in 6 hours. Should we begin broadcasting our terms?" "Not yet," President Choi replied. "Let them worry a little longer." The human terms had been prepared months ago. Every detail had been planned with the same careful precision that humans brought to all their projects. The galaxy would be rebuilt, but this time humans would be in charge from the beginning. Ambassador Ji-won Kim sat in her private cabin aboard the Absolute Authority, reviewing the files she had compiled over the past 15 years. Every slight, every insult, every vote against human interests had been carefully documented. The species that had opposed humanity would face consequences for their choices, but the files also contained records of the species that had supported humans or remained neutral. These species would be offered better treatment in the new galactic order. Humans were not vindictive, but they were thorough. "Ambassador?" Her aide knocked on the door. "Admiral Ko requests your presence on the bridge. We're approaching Nexus Prime." Ji-won closed her files and walked to the bridge. Through the main view screen, she could see the station where she had spent 3 years trying to build peaceful cooperation between humans and other species. That effort had failed, but it had taught humanity valuable lessons about galactic politics. The Kyo. Human fleet took positions around Nexus Prime without being challenged. Defensive installations that should have opened fire remained silent. The species that had once laughed at human departure now waited in terrified silence for human judgment. "Open a communication channel to the council chamber," Admiral Ko ordered. The main screen in the council chamber flickered to life, showing Admiral Ko's stern face. Behind him, other human officers could be seen working at their stations with quiet efficiency. The humans looked calm, confident, and completely in control. "Members of the former Galactic Council," Admiral Ko began. "I am Fleet Admiral Jamin Ko of the Human Commonwealth Defense Force. By the authority granted to me by President Yoonmi Choi and the Human Parliament, I am here to inform you that your organization has been dissolved." The chamber erupted in shouts and protests, but Admiral Ko continued speaking as if nothing had happened. "The human Commonwealth is hereby assuming administrative control of all galactic infrastructure, trade networks, and communication systems. Species that comply with our transition requirements will be incorporated into the new galactic government. Species that resist will be left to manage their own affairs without access to human-maintained systems." Counselor Vextar found his voice. "You have no authority to dissolve the Galactic Council. We are a sovereign organization representing 200 species across the galaxy." Admiral Ko's expression didn't change. "Your authority ended when you proved incapable of maintaining galactic civilization without human assistance. We tried cooperation. We offered partnership. You rejected both in favor of restrictions and limitations. Now you will accept human leadership, or you will accept the consequences of independence." "This is conquest," shouted Representative Thrix. "You're no different from any other imperial power." "No," Admiral Ko replied calmly. "Conquest implies we're taking something that belonged to someone else. We're simply reclaiming the systems we built and maintained for 15 years. The navigation networks, the communication arrays, the medical databases, the terraforming technology. All of it was designed and maintained by human expertise. We're taking back what was always ours." Dr. Vexutai, who had spent months studying the crisis, asked the question that everyone was afraid to hear answered. "What happens to the species that opposed human membership in the Council?" Admiral Ko smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That depends on their level of cooperation going forward. Ambassador Kim will be addressing specific cases individually." Ambassador Jiwon Kim stepped forward. Her calm demeanor hadn't changed since her departure 6 months ago, but now she spoke with the authority of a conqueror rather than a supplicant. "Species will be classified into 3 categories," she announced. "Allies, who supported human interests and will be granted full partnership in the new Commonwealth. Neutrals, who remained uninvolved in anti-human activities and will be offered limited membership. And opponents who actively worked against human interests and will be restricted to their current territories with minimal Commonwealth support." The classification system had been designed months ago. Every species voting record, every diplomatic statement, and every action taken during the crisis had been carefully analyzed. The humans had perfect records of who had been friend, enemy, or neutral. The Zephyrian Mining Consortium, the Kepler Trading Federation, and the Rigelian Medical Alliance are classified as neutral. Ambassador Kim continued. "You will be offered membership in the Commonwealth with standard trading rights and medical support." Relief was visible on the faces of those representatives. They would survive with dignity intact. The Tau Cetian Republic, the Vegan Collective, and the Centauri Union are classified as allies. You supported human expansion rights and opposed the restrictions that led to our departure. You will be granted full partnership status with expanded trading privileges and guaranteed protection. Those species had made the right choice. They would prosper under human leadership. The Altarian Empire, the Andromedan Alliance, and the Draconian Hegemony are classified as opponents. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. You led the opposition to human membership. You celebrated our departure. You refused to acknowledge your dependence on human assistance. You will be restricted to your current star systems. No expansion rights. No access to Commonwealth infrastructure. No medical or technical support. You are free to maintain your independence, but you will do so without human help. Counselor Vextar stood up, his blue skin pale with shock. "You're condemning millions of people to death. Our civilizations can't survive without the infrastructure you built." "You should have considered that before you voted to restrict our activities," Ambassador Kim replied without emotion. "You wanted independence from human influence, now you have it." The Altarian economy had been built on trade routes maintained by human navigation systems. Their colonies depended on terraforming technology that only humans understood. Their medical facilities used databases that only human doctors could access. Without Commonwealth support, the Altarian Empire would collapse within a year. General, Fax's holographic image flickered as he tried to maintain communication from draconian space. This is genocide by economic warfare. This is the natural consequence of your choices, Admiral Ko replied. You declared that you didn't need human assistance. We're simply honoring your declaration. But the humans weren't completely without mercy. Ambassador Kim continued her announcement. Individual planets and colonies within opponent territories may apply for separate membership in the Commonwealth. Applications will be reviewed based on each world's specific actions during the crisis period.